What's going on, YouTube? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Rolling Times. Today on the Rolling Times, we're going to be doing front brakes, front pads and rotors on a 2016 Chevy 2500 HD gas. Down there. Should be the same procedure on a diesel, or at least very similar. So if you guys are in the video just to see how to do your front brakes on your Chevys, just skip ahead. I'm going to go ahead and talk about the channel a little bit for the regular subscribers. So you guys remember my W8 Passat 4Motion 6-speed manual. It's a little bit rare if you know what that is. It has been sitting since cruise week. I've been driving around a little bit, but the cooling fans have taken a crap, so we got to do something about that. Either get new OEM fans or wire up some aftermarket ones to keep it cool. Other than that, the thing was running really good. Did great down at cruise week. Just didn't get to drive it quite as much as I wanted to because of the cooling issue. You may have noticed there's another Passat here, and it is another gray 4Motion Passat. And to top that off, it's stick shift. Well, this is my dad's new car. It does need some work. He just got it. We got a pretty good deal on it because it's been out of inspection since 2018. So it's been sitting for a while. I'm sure it's going to need like some brakes and basic stuff. It does have a slight, I believe, an evap leak because it smells like fuel a little bit at idle. So we're going to go over this thing in a future video and probably be doing some work on that. It's actually a 1.8T, which I'm kind of jealous because even though the W8 is a super rare car and it sounds really good, so you guys know it's really easy to make power with these 1.8Ts. With a little bit of work, this thing will probably be just as fast, if not faster, than my W8. Plus it's never ending how far you can go with these. I mean, people make 1,000 horsepower out of these 1.8Ts. Obviously that costs some money, but it's way easier to make power with this motor than it is with that W8, no matter how cool the W8 sounds. So pretty cool. I'm not sure how many of these 1.8T 4Motion manual cars there were. It's probably not quite as rare as that one, but it's definitely not something you see all the time. So if you guys are interested in that, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you get a notification as soon as we start doing some more Passat work. First thing we want to do, crack all the lug nuts loose, especially if you don't have good air tools. You want to do this before you lift the truck up. We're not going to take them completely off. We're just going to make sure they're not super tight. 22 millimeter. Next up, we've got to get this wheel off the ground. Unfortunately, this thing doesn't fit in our garage, so we're doing it out here in the driveway. Stone driveway with a little bit of a slope. If it's not recommended to be jacking vehicles up on a sloped stone driveway, but if you're in a stone driveway or whatever you're doing, like I said, I don't recommend doing it in the first place. But to help you out a little bit, grab a piece of plywood for the jack to slide on. What happens a lot of times in a stone driveway, when you start lifting the vehicle up with the jack can't move, so as it goes up, it's going to pull the vehicle to the whichever direction the jack is in, because it can't roll freely. So by putting this plywood here, the jack can move where it needs to go. and it's not going to yank the truck around. We got it just barely off the ground. Like I said, not ideal conditions here. I'm leaving the jack under just for an extra support. We do have the weight of the truck supported on this jack stand here. Now we're into our brakes. With the wheel off, it's a good time to take a look at steering suspension components. One thing that's common on trucks is the sway bar end links, like the brake. This thing's a 2016, only 90,000 miles, so everything's looking pretty good here. Looks like somebody's giving the ball joint a little extra grease. The boot's leaking here, but I don't see anything in here to worry about. Taking a look at our brake caliper here, you got these covers that keep the grease in the slide pins. You're gonna have to pop them out like that, and then you got an Allen head in there to remove the slide pin. 10mm Allen. I'm allergic to Chevys. Just make sure you got that slide pin all the way out before you try and take the caliper off. Now we have the caliper off of there. You're gonna want to set this somewhere so it doesn't hang by the hose. You can tie it up too if you want. Now we can get our brake pads out. They're stuck in there pretty good. Yeah, these things were shot. If he would have waited any longer, he probably would have destroyed the calipers as well. So once they get so far worn down, the caliper piston starts popping out of the caliper, and you know, all kinds of crazy stuff happen. So pads are out. Next is going to be the caliper bracket. These look to be about a 21. Alright, if anything fights you, it's probably going to be these bracket bolts, especially if they're original. Yeah.
This is where you say if you can't get it, heat it up with a torch.
If these bracket bolts fight you guys too much, just take the torch, get the caliper bracket right by where the bolt threads in, nice and warm. Get your ratchet on there, give it a few smacks, and she'll start coming. Probably going to be rough the whole way out.
You get to do it all over again to the bottom one.
Yep. Caliper bracket. Now we got to get the rotor off.
One eternity later.
So Brandy noticed This rotor had a set screw in it to hold the rotor on. That's why it wasn't coming off while I was beating on it. I didn't notice it there because it's so rusted into the rotor, it looked like part of the rotor. This is going to be fun to try and get out. It looks like it was a Torx at one point, so we're just going to heat it up real hot and see if we can get lucky. One tool you can try is an impact driver on these set screws for the rotors. These work with a hammer. As you hammer it, it helps turn the bolt, so they usually give better results than just using a ratchet. Fortunately, we heated up and it's still rounded out, so if you guys get to this point, your best option is going to be to drill it out. You don't need these, they just keep the rotors seated while the lug nuts and stuff are off, so once the wheel and everything goes on, the rotor's going to be seated where it needs to be. So we got it mostly drilled out. It wasn't quite all the way through. A couple good smacks with a hammer, pop the rest of it off. Now we can finally get this rotor out of here. Oh, and look how rusty that hub is.
Don't do that!
What? You're doing nice work.
Yeah, you can't just pop up to the freaking side of me.
Okay. It's always a good idea to clean up any kind of rust on the hub behind that rotor. The reason we do this is when you put the new rotor on there, any kind of rust buildup behind there that's not even can cause the rotor to sit not 100% flush. If that happens, you're going to get some vibrations and shakes that are going to be real hard to track down. I'd like to take a short break in this video to talk about our channel's sponsor, ABW Auto Glass. If you guys are in the Reading or Lancaster area and you need any automotive glass replaced, please give Barry a call. I'll put his info in the video here. He's going to offer some of the best prices. He offers mobile work, so he's going to come to you to replace that window so you don't have to worry about dropping your car off somewhere and going to pick it up again. And he does quality work, so please check with him if you guys need windshields or any automotive glass. And we'd like to really thank you, Barry, for sponsoring our YouTube channel. Okay, after we're done cleaning that hub up, so we don't have to deal with this next time, we're going to go ahead and lay some grease on the hub. So it'll keep the corrosion from building up, and it'll make it easier to separate our rotor if we have to remove it. On a nice even layer. Pretend you're painting a pretty picture for your girlfriend.
You gonna do that for me?
I am right now. Customer provided us some drilled and slotted rotors. If you decide to go with drilled and slotted rotors, make sure you know they are directional. So this one's labeled front driver's side, and we're working on the front driver's side, so that's where we're going to put it. These rotors generally have a coating on from the factory so they don't corrode or rust in the warehouse. So it's always recommended to just hit them with some brake clean quick on the braking surface. Give them a quick wipe down. And our brake pads came with some nice new hardware for the caliper bracket. You don't always have to replace these. I've noticed a lot of times with like the AutoZone pads and stuff, the clips they send are really cheap and don't really fit too well. These are the power stop clips. I usually have good luck with them, but you definitely want to have them. If you do decide to reuse the old ones, just clean them up good. Once you got all your new clips on there, go ahead, get your caliper bracket lined back up. If you want, you can put a little bit of blue Loctite on these. I've never had to, and I've never had any issues, and I've done tons of these. As long as you make sure they're nice and tight, but if you want the peace of mind, go ahead and put some Loctite on them. Got our new brake pads. Before we put those in, we're going to grease all these hardware pieces. I was always taught if your brake pads have the squealers, you want the squealer to be the inside and down. Now you're asking, Zach, how do we fit that caliper over there with some nice thick new pads? We're going to take our old brake pad, unless you have a caliper compressor tool, which is nice. It's kind of like a caulk gun, but it pushes the pistons back in. It's okay if you don't have that. We're just going to use the old brake pad and a big seat clip, or seat clamp clip. On these dual piston calipers, it's going to be nice to have two if you have two. So a lot of times as you compress one, the other one wants to pop back out. So you want to get it from this side. Like to grease the pad where the caliper touches it. We're going to put some grease. You can either grease the slide pins, you can grease inside of the caliper where they go. You took notice those old pads, the inside one was shot and the outside one still had some life left on it. It's probably because the slide pins weren't moving how they should. Slider with the big rubber on it goes in the bottom. This guy goes in the top. You can feel when it seats in the threads there. Sometimes you got to move the caliper a little bit to get it to seat. Last thing we're going to do before we put the wheel back on, just take a little bit of grease lightly on the surface of this rotor. Will keep the wheel from sticking to it and corrosion from building up. Also guys, since we got a nice new rotor on there, cleaned up hub, go ahead and clean up any corrosion on the back of your wheel. Don't forget these little rubber covers that go over the slide pin bolts. That's what keeps all the grease in them slide pins. So if you don't put those back in, then the grease will dry up and the caliper will stick and your brakes will wear out too fast. Okay guys, we're gonna go ahead and get the other side all finished. We still gotta do that side. It's gonna be just the same process we did over here, so we're not gonna bother filming it. Once you're done installing your new brakes, make sure when you get in the vehicle, before you start or anything, pump the brake pedal a few times. If you don't, you're gonna go to use the brakes and it's gonna go straight to the floor because we pressed those caliper pistons in, so they're gonna have to come back out and grab the pads. It's gonna take a couple pumps of the brake pedal. Now, before you go hot rodding around on your new brakes, you want to take a couple laps around the block and you want to bed in the brakes. Power Stop recommends 30 stops. You want to be at 30 mile an hour and you want to slow down to 5 miles an hour. They recommend doing that 30 times, giving some intervals in between those stops for the brakes to cool down. After that, they should be all bedded in and ready to go. They will bed in from normal driving, but if you don't do the bed in procedure, you run the risk of overheating them or possibly having some brake noise. So just make sure you go ahead and do that once you're all finished with your brake job. If you guys learned anything in today's video, please drop a like. If you're excited to learn more or wanted to see our future projects, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification. Anything else, Brandy?
Spin.
Spin. Take it easy, guys. We'll catch you next time.